Hello children, welcome back to the channel. Today we will be discussing or starting our discussions with certain problems related to spring forces as we had promised in the previous video. So what we had found is that spring force in the previous video, what we have found is that spring force is a conservative force, and also which means that work done by spring force depends on the initial and the final position of the spring. It doesn't depend on the path taken. The details of this you can easily find in my previous video, so you may please refer to that. The link will be given in the description below. So for our first problem, what we have is that we are given two springs. One has a spring constant of K1, the other one has a spring constant of K2. Two different springs with two different spring constants such that K1 is greater than K2. We need to find that in which spring more work will be done. More work will be done for two different cases. Case number one, when we apply the same force is applied to both the springs, and case number two is when both the springs are extended by the same amount, same extension. So let's break the problem into two parts. First, we need to find that if we have these two springs whose spring constants are given by K1 and K2 such that K1 is greater than K2, if the same force is applied to both of them, how much work will be done in both of them? So first, let's say W1 is the work done in the first spring if the same force is applied, right? So, and W2 is the work done in the second spring. Let's assume that. Now, what it has been given is that the same force is applied in both the springs. Let's call this force F. Then, by property of springs, we must have that F is equal to K1 into extension of 1, the first spring, in magnitude we are talking. And also, this same force is applied to the second spring also, so for the second spring we must have F equal to K2 X2. Right? Where X1 and X2 are the extensions of the two springs respectively. In that case, what will be W1? By definition, work done will be stored as the energy, that is the potential energy of the spring will be K1 X1 squared, and W2 will be half K2 X2 squared. Right. So if we take the ratio W1 by W2, what we get is half K1 X1 squared divided by half K2 X2 squared. So halves will cancel, and then what we can say is equal to K1 X1 multiplied by X1. We can rearrange this. K1 X1 squared is equal to K1 X1 into X1. Similarly, in the denominator also K2 X2 multiplied by X2. But we have just found that K1 X1 is F and K2 X2 is F. So we can rewrite this as F into X1 and F into X2, which upon simplification will give us W1 by W2 will be equal to X1 by X2. Okay, so what we have from W1 by W2 is X1 by X2. Now, if we consider this equation K1 X1 equal to F equal to K2 X2, which gives us K1 X1 equal to K2 X2, 2, which means that X1 upon X2 will be K2 by K1. So we can rewrite this as K2 by K1. Now, at the initial condition what we have been given, K1 is greater than K2 or K2 is less than K1. So, W1 by W2 which is equal to K2 by K1, this gives us W1 is less than W2. Which means, if the same force is applied, the spring with lower spring constant, in the spring with lower spring constant, less amount will be done compared with the spring with higher spring constant. Okay, so first part is done, that W1 is less than W2. Now for the second part. For the second part, what has been given is that both the springs have the same extension. Let's call this X. So X1 equal to X2, right? So W1 will be half K1 into X and W2 will be half K2 into X. So if you take the ratio, we get W1 by W2, ratio of the work done in the springs will be K1 by K2. Since K1 is greater than K2, so W1 will be greater than W2. So if the two springs of different spring constants are extended by the same amount, then work done in this spring with higher spring constant will be more compared with the work done in the spring with lower spring constant. So for the next problem, we have been given a spring of spring constant 24 Newton per meter. K equals to 24 Newton per meter. And to the end of the spring is connected a mass of 4 kg. Okay, the spring is at its unextended position and the mass is resting on a horizontal frictionless plane. A force is applied, constant force of 10 Newton is applied to extend the spring along the horizontal. You are supposed to find what will be the velocity of the mass when the extension X is given by 0.5 meter. So, the constant force extends the spring and the spring has extended by 0.5 meter, and when it is released with what velocity, the object will tend to, the mass attached to the spring will tend to move. Okay, so to solve this, what we need to do is that we will again make use of principle of conservation of mechanical energy as we have discussed in the previous video. The link to the previous video is in the description, you may please refer to that. So what we have found here, we find is that whatever is the work done, say work done in extending the spring, this will result in, number one, the potential energy, increase in or change in potential energy, right? Which will be K x square plus K in kinetic energy, half mv square. Okay. Now what is the work done? This work done is simply force into extension by definition. So if we are able to solve this problem, we will be able to reach at our required velocity. So what we will do is that we substitute the values. What is F? F is given to be 10 Newton, extension is 0.5 meter, must be equal to half into K is 24 Newton per meter, X square is 0.5 whole square plus half, M is 4 kg into the velocity square. We do not know the velocity, we need to find the velocity. So we have a numerical equation here where there is a v square term. So we can simply easily solve it for v square. So what will be the value of v square? This will give us 5 equal to, this is say 12. 0.5 square is 0.25. 0.25 into 12 will be 3, right? So this will be 3. 12 into 0, yeah, plus 2v square. Or we can get 2v square equal to 2, or v square equal to 1. Therefore, v is equal to plus minus 1, that is 1 meter per second. What will be the direction of the v? It will always be opposing to the extension, that is, it will always be moving. When it's released, it will be moving in the opposite direction of the extension, right? So it will be in the negative direction. Okay, for the next problem, what we have been given is that there is a ball of mass m which is dropped onto a platform fixed at the top of a spring connected to the ground. This support is rigid, it will not move. So when it is dropped from a height of h onto the pan moves downwards, right? Depresses, and it comes to this position, that is, it depresses through a displacement, extra displacement of x. So the mass is dropped onto the plane because of the pan mass dropping on the spring. The spring comes to this lowest point of x, or sorry, this particular level, by it moves through a displacement of x. We are supposed to find the spring constant k of the spring. We have considered the spring is massless, right? So to solve this problem, what we need to find first is that what is the total distance it has moved? The ball has dropped from here and reached at this particular level, so it has dropped through a height of h plus x, right? So at this point it has certain potential energy. At this point also it will have certain potential energy. However, because of its position coming lower, it will lose some potential energy. How much potential energy it will lose will simply be given by mg into the height through which it has fallen. So it will be h plus x. Now, by conservation of mechanical energy, this potential loss of potential energy must manifest as the work done against the spring. So what will be the work done? W against the spring will be half kx square, right? So by conservation of mechanical energy, these two must be equal, that is, work done must be equal to loss of potential energy of the ball. So in other words, you can write therefore half kx square must be equal to mg h plus x. Cross multiplication will give us k equals to 2mg h minus x divided by x squared, and this will be our required result, the required spring constant of the spring k. Now let's move on, and we come to a very important relationship, probably the most important, or not most important, yes, it's very important in physics, and also the most famous equation of all of physics, that is E equal to mc squared. Now I have written it a little differently, m equal to E by c squared. Why? Because Einstein initially in his paper wrote the equation like this. It's only that with cross multiplication we finally found that E equal to mc squared. Now what it means? To understand this, first of all, it's of course quite a bit part of a higher physics, but to understand this, first thing we need to understand is that energy can have different forms, which we have already discussed in a bit in our previous videos. We have already talked that there are different forms of energy. One, about mechanical energy, that we have discussed extensively in this particular chapter in my previous videos, which you can always find the link to which you can always find in the description below. Now, mechanical energy is just one form of energy. There are other forms of energy. For example, heat is a form of energy. Sound, again, another form of energy. The nuclear energy, as we have said, the wind blowing, the tides, everything carries certain amount of energy, and that energy, which means that energy can take a wider or very varied range of appearances. So there are different forms of energies, and there is interchangeability possible between forms of energy. For example, when you clap, what do? You move the hands together, they come in contact, and as a result, because of the kinetic energy, it gets converted into another form of energy, what? The sound energy, right? So energy can be converted from one form to another. That knowledge was with us for a very, very long time. What Einstein did is that he found his theories that the mass of an object that we know, we have been measuring from time immemorial, is also a manifestation of the energy contained in the body. And the mass can be converted into energy, and energy can be converted into mass. So mass and energy are not two different things. This is very, very important to understand. Mass and energy are equivalent. Mass is equivalent to energy. You can say mass that we measure is a measure of the energy contained in the body. That's what he meant by this equation, m equal to E by c square. The total amount of energy contained in a body divided by c square, where c is speed of light. So square of speed of light will give us the mass contained in the body. And of course, which means that if you are given certain mass m, then if you are able to release the entire mass or convert entire mass into energy, the energy that will be generated will be mass times c squared. Right? Now remember, c itself is a very, very large number. It's approximately 3 into 10 to the power 8 meter per second, right? Speed of light, right? So if it is so, square of c will be 9 into 10 to the power 16 meters square per second square. Okay, so if it is so, even a very, very small amount of mass is capable of or contains a very, very huge amount of energy. For example, if we say 10 to the power, say 1 milligram, that is 10 to the power minus 3 kg. 1 milligram of mass will contain how much energy? It will be 10 into 10 to the power 13 kg meters per joule of energy. 9, then 13 zeros after that, joule of energy, which is a huge amount of energy contained in it. This equation has been instrumental initially in quite a devastating work of the atomic bomb, but the nuclear reactors that we are doing nowadays is based on this. The useful or say positive uses of nuclear energy, we are able to understand how solar or the sun or the other stars work with the help of this. There is in elementary particle physics, particularly pair production, that is two particles being produced from light, or annihilation of particles, electron and positron coming together and they generating a flash of light or energy. All these things are explained or can be understood in this particular equation, and that's why it's not only the most famous equation in physics. Probably every person, even if a person is not studying physics and knows this equation, E equal to mc square, but it is also a very, very, very important part of physics. Okay, in our previous videos, what we have discussed is that how energy is conserved, particularly mechanical energy is conserved. What we did assume there is that there is no loss of energy or no conversion of energy in any other forms. But we understand that energy can move from one form to another, right? It can be converted from one form to another. Like I had already demonstrated a little while earlier that motion or kinetic energy can be converted into sound energy or heat energy. Like rubbing a stone with another stone, you produce heat, right? Or you can rub your hands together and you feel the warmth of the hands increasing. All these things means that energy can be converted from one form to another. Now, if it is so, then what happens in case of a system which is not interacting with any other type of system? The net energy of the system must remain conserved. What it means is that, say when you drop a ball from a particular height, it rebounds, right? But it doesn't rebound to the same height. It rebounds to a little lower height if you try to experiment it. Now what happens there is that when the ball touches the ground, a bit of energy that was carried by the ball will get converted into heat energy, a bit of it gets converted into sound energy. So thereby it loses certain amount of energy, and thereby that's why it doesn't bounce back to the same height. However, the amount of heat energy that is generated and the amount of sound energy that is generated during the ball hitting the ground, if you measure those two forms of energy and also the kinetic and the potential energies of the ball before and after the ball has hit the ground, you will find that total energy of all forms will remain conserved, and that is known as the principle of conservation of energy. Net energy will never change. So there are different ways of saying it, principle of conservation of energy. I'll give you a couple of statements. First statement is that energy can neither be created nor be destroyed. It may transform from one form to another, as we have just explained. Energy is not created. How? You see, when you pull the ball from the ground upwards, you are doing work, you are applying force. When you are applying force and doing work, you have to spend energy that is stored in your body. So that gets converted into increase in potential energy. When you release the ball, the potential energy gets converted to kinetic energy. When the ball hits the ground, some kinetic energy gets converted into sound energy or heat energy, and rest rebounds as the kinetic energy. It reaches to a particular height, the energy gets converted to potential again. So the ball again, when the ball stops and then it moves down. So what is happening every time? Energy is changing its form. However, no new energy has been created nor it has been destroyed. What is happening is that energy changing its form from one to another. So energy can neither be created nor be destroyed. It can only transform from one form to another. We can also say that if there is an isolated system, we have already discussed an isolated system is a system that doesn't interact with the surroundings. No interaction, no amount of energy enters it, no amount of force it exerts on the outside world. So whatever is the total energy of this isolated system, it will not change. However, within the system, the forms of energy can change. In our experiment, as we said, when we released the ball and it reached the ground and it came back, we can consider a ball and the ground to be a single isolated system, and it is not interacting with anything else. In that case also, whatever the total energy, it's changing form from potential to kinetic to heat to sound, again to kinetic and then again to potential. It is doing that. However, the total energy of the system will be within the system and it will never be lost. It will only be converting from one form to another. Yes, we might not be able to do useful work from the energy, but the energy will still be contained there. If it is true that energy of an isolated system doesn't change, then we can also consider that this isolated system is our whole universe. As we know, we have one universe and there are theories of multiple universe, but that theory also says that these universes do not interact with each other per se. So the entire universe can be considered as a single entity and as an isolated system, not interacting with anything else. If it is the universe, then total energy of the universe must be conserved. Whatever energy was contained in the universe at the very, very beginning, at the time of Big Bang, and now and long into the future, the total energy will still be the same. Only thing that the initial stages, the energy was in the form of heat, then it got converted into other forms, but we need to remember total energy of the universe will remain conserved. So these are different statements of law of principle of conservation of energy, and this is going to be very, very important because we are going to use this over and over again, and it's one of the most basic principles of physics, and it applies to almost entire physics, that energy, total energy of a system, isolated system, will remain conserved, will not change. Now let's move on to the third term of work, energy and power, that is power. Now what do we mean by power? Power is defined as the rate of doing work. Let us say we do certain amount of work, W, in a given time, say T. Then this ratio, work done per unit time, will be the power. Rate at which work is done is known as power, which means it has the dimension of work by time, so it will be m1 L square T inverse 3, because work was m L square T inverse 2. Okay, and the unit of power, one unit of power will be 1 joule of work by 1 second, that is 1 joule per second, and this unit is known as watt, W-A-T-T, after James Watt. So 1 watt of power is 1 joule per second, the rate of doing work. Now, in case of variable work done also, in case we cannot take, this is the average power, right? We have taken a relatively long period of time. In case of, say, variable work done, a small amount of work is done in small amount of time, delta t. Okay, so if I take a limit of this, that delta t tends to 0, the time taken is much smaller. So this will give us the instantaneous power. But this is equal to dW by dt. Okay, so power is equal to dW by dt. However, from our first video on work, power and energy, we had found that W is given by F dot dx, right? Or F dot dr, displacement. So this must be d dt of F dot dr. Now we have considered that if dr is infinitesimally small, F can be considered as practically constant. So we can rewrite this equation as F outside dot dr by dt. But rate of change of position is velocity. So what we know is that displacement is velocity. So rate of displacement is velocity. So P will be equal to F dot V. Okay, so P equal to F dot V. Power is equal to force dot velocity. Now, in common life or our daily life, we come across a very important unit of this unit, kWh or kilowatt hour. Now, what is it? What particular physical quantity it represents? So normally, we say that this unit is given for electricity power consumption. However, please understand this, that this is whether it's a unit of power or not. Let's say what is it? It is equal to 1 kilowatt multiplied by 1 hour, which is power multiplied by time. If you look at it from this expression, this must be equal to W, or this is equivalent to energy. So when we say unit of power consumption, what we actually are talking about is the unit of energy consumption, and this kilowatt hour is not, though it appears as if it's a unit of power because the kilowatt term is there. However, it's not a unit of power, but it's a unit of energy because it's power multiplied by time. Now, what is the value of this? We can simply say this is 1000 or 10 cube watt multiplied by 3600. It is 3.6 into 10 cube second, which is equal to 3.6 into 10 to the power 6 watt into second, right? W second. But if you look at the relationship, watt and watt equal to 1 watt equal to 1 joule per second, or watt equal to joule per second. So watt multiplied by second will give us joule. So 1 kilowatt hour is basically 3.6 into 10 to the power 6 joule of energy that is consumed. Okay.